As devastating as today's attack on our D.C. National Guardsmen is, we can't say we're all that surprised. Democrat lawmakers have been trying to score political points by framing President Trump as the next Hitler, and instead of pushing back, leftist mouthpieces claiming to be journalists fearmonger on their behalf. Here's just one example. Reuters published a story claiming to have uncovered some grand scandal, a White House campaign of retribution. They claim the administration has targeted hundreds of individuals, agencies, and institutions for investigation, restructuring, or disciplinary action. They clutch their pearls and call it unprecedented, alarming, authoritarian. But before anyone breaks out the fainting couch, let's pause and remember something so obvious, it's astonishing that Reuters forgets it. These are the same institutions, the same bureaucrats, the same deep state actors and government insiders who spent years trying to destroy Donald J. Trump, his movement, and anyone standing within 15 feet of him. So now, suddenly, accountability is retribution? Give me a break. Let's walk through where this narrative just collapses. First, Reuters pretends that the retribution list is some shocking retaliatory hit sheet. They wring their hands because agencies have been reorganized, personnel reassigned, and certain officials fired, of course. But for years, we watched a weaponized federal machine hit the MAGA movement with everything short of drones. Under Biden, the mission was simple: use the government to crush the political opponent, the supporters, the staff, anyone who dared get in the way. Remember the stakes here. The man they're accusing of retribution, Trump, was the target of actual political persecution, not metaphorical, actual. He wasn't just criticized, he wasn't debated, he wasn't just investigated. He was harassed. He was indicted over and over by prosecutors who behaved like political operatives. He was subjected to raids, leaks, smears, and character assassination. He was the target of an actual assassination. He was surrounded often by staff who were pushed into bankruptcy by endless subpoenas or legal fees and congressional inquisition. And that's before we get into what they did just like to everybody. Steve Bannon, jailed. Peter Navarro, jailed. Dan Scavino, censured by a partisan committee determined to destroy him politically and personally. General Flynn, dragged through years of phony, bogus charges. Even Trump's lawyers, guess his lawyers were targeted for the crime of providing legal representation. Even the prosecutor who took over Fani Willis's 2020 case against Trump knows that this is just bonkers, total lawfare. Today, Fulton County Judge Scott McAfee declared that the case against Trump and his co-defendants is dismissed in its entirety. President Trump reacted to the news on Truth Social, saying this illegal, unconstitutional, and un-American hoax was perpetrated against our nation by Fani and her low IQ lover Nathan Wade at the direction of crooked Joe Biden and his handlers. This case never should have been brought in the first place. We have to hold responsible those who attempted to destroy our legal system and nation itself as they tried to use it to silence and imprison political opponents for protecting our country and exercising our First Amendment rights. Yet still, Reuters and the rest of the political pearl clutchers want you to believe that Trump is the one abusing power because finally he is cleaning house, because he's asking inspectors general, the agencies, the bureaucracies to account for what they did. This is not retribution. This is restoration. It's justice. It is the first real audit of the deep state this country has ever seen. And here's the kicker. The very people sounding the alarm today are the ones who cheered all of this on as Biden himself was wandering around in the Rose Garden asking for Jell-O and slippers. They applauded when Biden promised to be America's sweet, gentle grandpa and then transformed into a vacant figurehead for the most radical elements of his party. When he smiled and shuffled around, the real operators behind him, the Woketopians, they weaponized every lever of government to punish their opponents. Federal law enforcement, intelligence agencies, regulatory bodies, they turned each one into a pressure tool against their enemy, the rest of us. And when patriotic Americans raised concerns, when they stood up at school board meetings, when they posted on social media, when they supported the wrong candidate or carried the wrong side, they were branded extremists. At their jobs, they were thrown in Facebook jail. The threats that were totally amplified are absurd. People were called domestic terrorists for posting the Betsy Ross flag. Parents were investigated. Volunteers were surveilled. Churches scrutinized. Veterans were put on watch lists. all under the Biden administration's watch, while Biden himself seemed barely aware of what room he was in. So the question isn't whether President Trump is pursuing retribution. The question is, why did these institutions believe they could behave this way without facing accountability? Did General Milley really think he could just undermine Trump to China and call it a mulligan when we got power again? Did John Bolton think he could write a book with classified information and just skate? Did dozens of intelligence officials who lied about Hunter Biden's laptop think they could keep their security clearances under Trump? Why did they assume if they weaponized the government for political ends that there would be no consequences when the American people finally voted them out? Reuters is terrified because for the first time in decades, someone is actually doing the one thing Washington hates most: holding government accountable to the people it serves. When Trump looks at an agency that targeted conservatives, he doesn't just shrug and say, that's how Washington works. He is asking questions and demanding answers and firing people who abused their power. And he's elevated people committed to transparency rather than political games. It's not authoritarian, it's constitutional. It's not vengeance, it's oversight. And it's not retribution, it's justice. Long overdue, deeply necessary, and overwhelmingly supported by millions of Americans who have lived through the government's abuse firsthand. If cleaning up agencies that targeted innocent Americans is retribution, well, then maybe Washington could use a whole lot more of it. Joining us now, managing partner at M.R. Parker Law, attorney Michael Parker. Michael, I want to get to these claims about the weaponization of our legal system in a moment, but first, you're an officer of the court. You try cases. In that role, lawyers regularly interact with law enforcement. What goes through your mind as you see the news of these slain guardsmen in Washington, D.C. today?
Yeah, so I saw the article about it, and it makes me think a couple things. I know there was a lot of pushback on Trump about sending the National Guard to D.C. I know that a lot of people on the left were saying, hey, crime is getting better. It's completely unnecessary. But what this shows is that Trump was absolutely correct in sending the National Guard. There is a very strong need for safety in the city. These shootings happened, I think, a couple blocks from the White House. So, my prayers go out to the family. You might not be aware, but I'm actually a reserve sheriff as well. So, law enforcement is very important to me. And it's very sad to see what happened in D.C.
Part of what concerns me about our politics today is dehumanizing the other side, acting as though they need to be exterminated. We certainly don't do that here. But there's this massive piece out in Reuters that casts Trump as a tyrannical villain, weaponizing the justice system. As you look at the landscape of the legal enforcement that's happening now, do you see a justice system that's being abused?
I don't. In fact, I see a justice system that was being abused while Trump was out of office. And then once Trump got into office, he's kind of swinging the pendulum back the other way to neutralize everything. I think a lot of these prosecutions are setting things back to the way they should be, but they're not prosecutions for political motivation on Trump's end. I don't think that he is trying to copy what happened on the left. I think what he's trying to do is set things back to where they should be. I think this is a realignment to the way that the government should be run. And I'm sure you saw the news coming out of Georgia with the prosecution getting dropped. But there's a new prosecutor there. The charges for the election tampering were dropped with Donald Trump. So it seems like things are going back to the way they should be in the country.
It does seem like a lot of hypocrisy when the people who were spying on parents at school board meetings, or folks who are worshiping at traditional Catholic churches, or even spying on members of Congress, that those people would accuse Trump of this type of thing is quite rich. But it does beg the question how you deal with those things. You can't live in a society where the side that wins always is going after the side that loses. But at the same time, we have Article 3 courts to resolve whether or not there needs to be accountability when people do color outside the line. So I'm wondering, as you approach that balance, how you think the Trump administration ought to press it.
I mean, I don't think Trump is even going out of their way, or the Trump administration really going out of their way to prosecute people. I mean, a lot of these prosecutions are based on referrals from other governmental entities. Now, if you remember with Tish James with the mortgage fraud, that wasn't even the DOJ leading that charge. It was an outside governmental entity that referred it to the DOJ, right? And they're trying to accuse the Trump administration of using the government as a weapon to go after his political opponents. So some of these are, the Trump administration trying to rectify previous wrongs done by the prior administration. But some of these prosecutions are completely on their own. They're isolated prosecutions that would have happened outside of any political climate, particularly Tish James, right? She was prosecuted for something she did that another government agency noticed, and then it was referred to the DOJ. But I think what the Trump administration is doing is the right thing. They're making sure to, put an end to the political prosecutions. They're making sure that the people that were culpable for the political prosecutions are either getting fired or, getting prosecuted themselves. If you look at how many federal employees have been let go, that's not because of a political realignment of the government. That's because those federal employees were being used as tools by the prior administration to, as political retribution. And, people say Trump getting rid of FBI agents, him getting rid of prosecutors is him trying to cleanse the government and, stack it with people who are aligned with his ideology. But that's not the case. What he's doing is he's removing the people who had ideology and were using that ideology to pursue their political opponents. And now what we're getting to is an administration and a government where things are neutral the way they should have been all along.
I think if all of this erupts in a massive conspiracy charge that really begins with this December 9th meeting that Obama has with Brennan and Clapper and Comey, and it directs them to go gin up the Russia hoax to hinder the Trump administration. I think if there is a charge that emerges out of that, you'll have a lot of people saying, well, I was acting within the scope of my employment. I'm immune from any criminal review of my conduct because I was following orders and doing what I was told. And in a lot of different areas of litigation, you have to analyze, is someone acting within the scope of their employment? Here, how do you think the case will go that these were ultra vires acts that were really in the criminal realm, not just in the bad bureaucracy realm?
Well, I mean, those arguments didn't work for Rudy Giuliani. They didn't work for Mark Meadows, right? All of these members of Trump's prior administration were getting prosecuted too. Think about in Georgia, how many members of his administration were being prosecuted by the state of Georgia, right? And it would be really ironic for Democrats if it were the other way to say, hey, look, these were in the scope of employment. These were direct orders from someone above them in the government, and try to use that to, wiggle out of it. But one thing, that I thought about earlier when I was reading all of this earlier today was, if this was truly political prosecution by the Trump administration, they would have indicted Biden, they would have indicted Obama, Hillary Clinton, right? There's so many people out there that Trump would want to go after if it was personal that he hasn't gone after. But then when you look at when the shoe is on the other foot, Trump is getting indicted, right? His chief of staff is getting indicted. His personal attorney is getting indicted. So when you look at who's the party in power who is using the system to prosecute their political opponents, it's very clear who it is, right? There's so many people that if Trump was using the government to go after his political opponents, he would go after. And there's so many people that haven't been prosecuted. Biden, like I said, Obama, Clinton, right? There's a whole laundry list of people that have been left off of that. And the people who are getting prosecuted are the people who had bad conduct, right? If you look at Comey, he lied to Congress. If you look at James, she lied on a mortgage application. So it's very clear what's going on here.
It is very interesting that it may be the Biden administration's excesses that create the precedent that hold some of the people from the Obama administration accountable.
Absolutely.
Because just like you said, they took the most maximalist position on holding people under a review of criminal statutes as opposed to looking at them as government employees. And now when you start to look at some of those final moments in the Obama administration, it's pretty gnarly conduct. Well, we appreciate you breaking it down for us, Michael R. Parker, the managing partner of M.R. Parker Law. Thanks as always.
Of course. Thanks, Matt. I appreciate it.